Every time I've given this talk, these jokes went down terribly, but I'm sticking with them. Alternative titles for this talk could have been, Casinos will hate you when you learn these simple hacks to improve your developer life. You feel no obligation to laugh. I know they're terrible. I followed these simple developer rules, and you wouldn't believe what happened next. Yeah. I'm sticking with them for the life of this talk. It's done. Hi. Hello? Thank you. I'm Gary. I've been a PHP developer for longer than I care to remember. I'm currently a developer evangelist. I don't know what that means, so if anyone does know what that job entails, let me know. I work for an amazing company called Twilio. I have to tell you that because they're paying for me to be here tonight, so that's my obligation out of the way. This has nothing to do with Twilio. Does anyone use Twilio? Nobody in this room uses Twilio. Does anyone know what Twilio is, at least? Okay, so we're a communications API that allow you to communicate with your customers via the typical channels, SMS, voice, any other good stuff. Hit me up if you're interested in that kind of stuff. More importantly, I was at the first ever PHP Southwest. That's me there. You can just see my stomach and hands. Just there. 2010. Yeah, hang on. My apologies. Let's try this again. I was at the first ever PHP Southwest in 2010. Anyone else in the room at the first ever PHP Southwest? I was. You took the photo, Rob. I know you were there. That's fine. It's amazing that I went to the first ever one 9 years ago, and I've been promising to speak at this meetup ever since, and it's taken me 9 years to finally get here, so a big hooray for that, please. Thank you very much. There we go. We won't have much more of that. It's fine. So this talk is kind of about, I've been developing, it's sort of like a reflection for me. I started developing professionally in 1999, so 20 years this year. I don't look old enough, I know. Who laughed? 4 people laughed. Thank you. I really like computer games. This is my sporadic podcast promotion that we released something this year, so that's a win, right? It's fine. Don't follow that. I do loads of coding on Twitch. This is just blatant self-promotion. But what I find is that I stream live coding on Twitch on a Tuesday. I try Tuesdays. I also try and stream gaming. I love computer gaming, but I'm absolutely terrible. If you've seen my stream, you'll know I'm so bad at it. And I find like even the obvious things that most people learn in the first 3 hours of playing a game, I'm really bad at. Are there any gamers, any computer gamers in the room? Yeah, lots of you are going to find this really challenging then. It's fine. It's fine. So I end up Googling stuff like this, right? Things I wish I knew earlier when I started playing whatever, $X. Pac-Man, right? It's a great example. So Pac-Man is so super obvious once you've played Pac-Man. But my little girl was playing Pac-Man. She was like, why the hell did you ever play this? You know, we've got all like 3D graphics and everything now. But it's pretty obvious, right? That you collect the dots. But she just thought that these flashing dots were, first of all, just normal dots. And then she thought that when you eat the dots, the ghosts just run away from you. It's not obvious the fact that you can now eat the ghosts, right? Things are obvious when they're obvious, but until you know them, like how would you ever know these obvious things in the first place? And so this is why I always end up, like everybody's just fascinated by, hang on, let me let this video finish and then... I love it. So I was like, yeah, this is kind of a loose analogy between gaming and my developer career because I thought it would be fun, really. I've kind of shoehorned in loads of things that don't really fit, but whatever, it's my talk, I can do what I want, so it's all good. So it's just a few tips. I mean, at 20 years as a developer, it's a long time, and there's so many things that I wished I'd known before, like at the beginning of my career, that it took me way too long. Some of these are really obvious, some of them not so much, but we can make a start. So my first tip is to put some points into Charisma. There's some game screenshots here. You feel free to shout out the games if you know them. I don't know if you will, but you know, I think you'll know some. There's some gamers in the room. So does anyone know this game? Fallout, yeah, Fallout 4. And this is typically how I would create a character, right? 1 in Charisma, because I don't care about speaking to everyone. I want to be able to like smash people with planks and stuff. I don't care about Charisma. But like in my career, it took me way too long. And there's a few people who know me and have even worked with me in the room will test that. Like it took me way too long to realize that getting on with people is the key to getting things done, right? Not everyone in their career will be working as a sole developer on a project. I did that for ages. I was the only developer in a team, in a company. And then you just kind of pick up all these bad habits. Like, we get things done as developers with the interactions with the other people in our team. So whether it's product owners or business analysts, if you're in, that kind of environment, or other developers or managers, I kind of will be thinking this, right? You're in a meeting and somebody comes up with an idea. In your head, you're thinking like, oh, that's a really ridiculous idea. Like, oh, what are they even suggesting that for? And I kind of just come out and say that, right? And then I was wondering why people didn't like me. I know it's a hard concept to think that people wouldn't like me, but yeah, I learned to kind of rephrase the question, to rephrase the way that I approach things, come out with an idea yourself. Yeah, that's okay, but have you thought about this? It's always better to give like bad news when you've got a better suggestion. Something I've been guilty of not doing recently, to be perfectly honest. But, I try hard to when I have to give contradictions, to also give suggestions. It makes so much of a difference. I wish I'd learned that a long time ago. But that's not to say that sometimes you just have to say like, no. No, I don't think that is a good idea. But again, it's the way you frame it. We have to say sorry, right? Because we're Brits, so we always say sorry anyway, so that's totally fine. But you have to learn when to say, no, I don't think that is a good idea, sorry, because of X, Y, and Z. I guess it's like, be nice, but don't be too nice because, I'm not saying let people walk all over you. I think, like, what it sums it up for me is I kind of try and be a straight talker because I feel like giving my opinions that I've been asked to give in as quick a way as possible means that we can get on to the meat of problems. But being a straight talker isn't an excuse to be a dick. That's kind of the fundamental thing about it. This is something that did the rounds on Twitter a few years ago that I took kind of to heart. Listening is not waiting for the other person to finish talking. I was so bad at this. I'm like, in a conversation, in an event like this, or in a conference, and somebody's talking to me, and I'm like, oh, I've got the best counterpoint ever to this conversation, and I'm just waiting, stop talking so I can nail you with my amazing point, right? But at that point, I've switched off. I'm assuming how they're going to finish their sentence. I'm assuming I know how the person's going to finish their point. So I've switched off. So when I'm not really listening to what they're saying now because I think I know what point they're trying to make. And it's infuriating to be on the other end of it, which I have been a few times. So it's like, yeah, I was really bad at that, and I still am. I try and work on this all the time. I catch myself doing it, relatively often still. But at least you've kind of detected the fact and you're trying to improve. So my next tip is to quick save regularly. I'm old enough to remember when quick saving wasn't even a thing. I'm old enough to remember when quick saving wasn't even on floppy disks. I used to play games on cassette tapes where you'd have to like take the cassette out and put a new cassette in to save your game. In fact, I don't think we ever bothered saving our games in those days. Like, even in this era, Monkey Island is a classic where you take out the game disc, you put in your save game, and then you take the save disc out and then you put the game disc back in. It takes like 3 minutes. This is not quick saving by today's standards. So, does anyone know this game? Half-Life, yeah. So the obvious thing for me to say when quick save regularly would be like commit often to Git. That would be the obvious analogy and the one I decided not to go with because I really wanted to get something about testing into this talk. I wish I'd learned about unit testing so much earlier in my career. There's no judgment, right? I still all the time write code that I don't unit test. But I don't do that to my paying customers because that's my own opinion that I should provide proof that my code works as intended. But it's such a hard thing to learn, and it's such a really difficult. I found it was a massive hump that I needed to get over, and then once I got over that hump, it's like, oh, why didn't someone like tell me about this ages ago and what it really is? Like lots of things in programming, we use the term unit testing, and it's intimidating, and it doesn't really describe what you're actually doing. It's like, unit testing, what's that? It's like if somebody had named it method testing or function testing early on, I think more people would be less intimidated. And this was the book that it was the previous book by Chris Hatches is the book that I finally managed to understand what testing was way later in my career than I'd like to admit. And this is the current book. I'm not on royalties. I should be, because I send enough money Chris's way, damn him. He's got a brand new book coming out soon as well, which kind of makes this one obsolete, so hold off a couple of weeks and buy the new one. But Chris Hatch's book, genuinely, even though he's a friend of mine, got me over the hump. I think that being able to, going back to what we just saw with legacy upgrades, right? Having a unit test suite makes those legacy upgrades so much easier. You've got that safety net. We saw Rector changing code and then running the tests to check we hadn't broken anything. It's like so valuable. I just wish I'd been doing it 5 years earlier than I was. I'll be perfectly honest. I heard all the buzz in the community about it. I didn't really understand it. I kind of just pushed it to one side and thought, I don't need to do that. Or my favorite excuse was, I'm pretty sure my boss wouldn't let me do it if I asked them. There's loads of excuses, but I think it's really important. You can shout questions out at any point, by the way. That's totally fine. So my next tip is play with friends. This is like almost everyone's here. It's the first step, really. Sorry, we need the game analogy. Anyone know this game? PUBG. My love-hate relationship. This is the game where you spend 20 minutes looting and then get shot across the map without ever seeing anyone. This is the most infuriating game I've ever played. I've got over 400 hours in this game, and I got my first win last week, so that's pretty impressive, right? I've only done it once, and I did feel like a god. That winner chicken dinner, I was like, oh yeah. Maybe more common and more up-to-date. Anyone know what this is? Yeah, this is the WoW Classic, where Blizzard cleverly released a 15-year-old game, which was terrible, and made people pay for it again. That is genius. I salute you. But there's a concept in World of Warcraft called twink. I gave this talk in the US, and apparently that means a whole other thing over there. So that was quite embarrassing. But the phrase twink is effectively friends taking another friend and giving them overpowered items and pulling them through dungeons they shouldn't be able to do at the level they are and leveling them up with them. And I've been hugely benefited and very kindly helped by lots of people in my career who've answered questions for me tirelessly, hang out on my stream. Did I mention I stream on a Tuesday? Have I mentioned that anymore? Yeah, it's fine. But no, genuinely been helped by tons of people. And relationships you can make with people in this room, it doesn't necessarily need to be people who you perceive to be better than you at what you do. People just have different views on the same things that you do. And speaking with your peers about problems that you're all facing is massively important. This is the one thing that changed my career. When I went from being a sole developer, Ryan Mauja, who's not here, and Rob dragged me to the first ever PHP Southwest, where that's the first time I met anyone who did the same job that I was doing. It's monumental. I've also been mentored by people. That's really been helpful to me. My particular case has been more informal. But I know a lot of people who have formal mentorships. There's websites like PHP Mentoring that can help you find mentors. Your mileage may vary. I'm undecided about PHP Mentoring. I know there are a lot of people who've had good success, but I think that finding mentors from within the people you know or people you meet are more valuable for me. There could be just somebody in your office who you think always does great work, and just saying, oh, look, do you mind, would you mind answering some questions for me now and again? Those kind of mentorship relationships are what helped me. I think that this is kind of embarrassing, but for a long time, I found it very, very difficult to ask questions of people. And those people who know me now will understand why that's kind of embarrassing, because now I'm completely the other way. But when you need to ask a question of somebody, you're saying, I don't know how to do that. Can you help, please? And it can be easy to think in your mind, oh, I'm revealing a weakness to people by saying, could you help me here? I don't know what I'm doing here. I get this all the time in my career. I've been doing it 20 years, and I'm lucky enough to be paid to be a developer evangelist and stand up here in room full of people. But last couple of weeks, I've been thinking, oh, geez, people will find me out at some point. And it's really difficult Like now I'm the other way. Now I just like ask questions all the time and annoy my friends where I probably should have done more research before asking the questions. I got over that hump, but it is difficult. There's these rooms full of people like these are the places where you'll find the most valuable help in your career, in my opinion. Totally my story and my thoughts. You know, you may disagree, but for me, this is exactly playing with friends is like what I would say is my number one takeaway here. Yeah, so that slide I should have put up last time. I don't know why I put the photo in here of me drinking a beer and really hating it, but it's there, so it's fine. You can laugh at me. So my next tip is to learn the mechanics. Does anyone know this game? EVE Online, yeah. Spreadsheets in space, as it's also known. This is a genuine screenshot from an EVE Online battle. This is massive space simulator where people just hang out and shoot each other, I don't know. But it's like a space trading game. It's been going forever, you know, it's been going so long. When I talk about like learning the mechanics in a gaming perspective is what gives you the huge benefits in the game, right? Knowing how the game works under the hood is what lets you to get good at it. And it's the same thing in development. So design patterns, like I'm going to come back to this. Design patterns are a set of problems that you can solve using specific methods that are named to scare you. That's what design patterns are. They got these hugely complicated names. Dependency injection, right? Oh, I remember like being scared of that term forever. And then realizing I was doing it anyway because I was passing arguments into my constructors. You know, they are more scary to try and read about. This is the kind of book that everybody refers to, the Gang of Four book, when it comes to design patterns. I bought that book. I read 3 pages of it, and now like I don't even know where it is. I could not get to grips with that at all. I never did a computer science degree, and I often wish I did, because I often wish like things like this, being taught things like this, I feel like would have been beneficial. But, you know, it's fine. I've picked them up by hook or by crook. The way that I learned design patterns the first time was on YouTube. Anthony Ferreira's Programming with Anthony, where he's like got long hair and looks really young. They're like 10 years old or something, the videos now. The design patterns haven't changed in 10 years, right? So the fact the videos are old, it makes the content is still great. That's what worked for me. He just draws them out on a sheet of paper, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense when it's described that way. And there's some good ones on Laracasts as well. And like everything to do with Laravel, though, they've like named them slightly differently, the design patterns, for some reason. So what everyone else thinks is a proxy, they name a facade, and what everyone else thinks is a facade, they name something else. Is fine, because the concept doesn't matter what you call them, right? It's like learning the concepts is what's important. You see these problems all the time that can be solved using these repeatable patterns. Really, really useful. Best practices I'm a big fan of, but I'm a big fan of best practices because I read a lot of code. And when I read a lot of code, if that code is all in the same coding style, it means I can read and understand that code a ton easier. Is this important if you're working on your own project? Some people will tell you yes, some people will tell you no. I'm kind of in between. As long as everyone on your team is writing in the same coding style, does it matter if it's a community-agreed PSR standard? Up to you. Probably nice to adopt that if you can, because then when you look at code examples on other websites or whatever, it helps you to understand things. Best practices are opinionated. Community generally agrees on them in the form of PSRs. I'm a big fan of that, but some of them have missed the mark. So think about why people have made decisions about these best practices, and they may not be for you. Like design patterns and best practices, this is like the classic, when all you've got is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? When I first learned the proxy pattern, I was proxying everything everywhere, because I'm like, look at me, I can proxy things, you know? You learn these patterns, and then you start to kind of try and overuse them. So yeah, I think that there are certain patterns that I would use in every project I did. And that is important to me. So use them or don't, really, it's up to you. But I wish I put some effort in earlier on in my career to learn those things. Any questions? I just wanted an excuse to take a drink, it's fine. So my next tip is to play online early. Does anyone know what this game is? Nobody's willing to... I know people know it, but nobody's willing to name this game. Is that what's happening here? Fortnite? Anyone heard of that game? It's kind of a big deal with the kids these days. No? It's banned. It should be banned. I'm terrible at it. It definitely should be banned. The most interesting thing is, obviously, when you're making slides, you just do Google image search for the games. You don't, like, I wouldn't install Fortnite to get a screenshot myself. But when I did a Google image search for Fortnite, I came across this screenshot from a streamer, and I was like, hang on, isn't that me in the corner playing Fortnite? It's like, it's not me, by the way. So when we talk about, like, playing online early, going back to the computer game analogy, when I buy a new game, it's tempting, like particularly with a multiplayer game, like a Call of Duty, Modern Warfare that's coming out now, or one of those games where you're playing against other people. It's tempting to like take it easy and go through the tutorials, do the single player missions, and get to know how the game works. Or when you're playing like PUBG that we mentioned, or I play a lot of Apex Legends and Fortnite, it's tempting to like drop in the quiet zones and loot up and just be. But like you don't learn anything. They say like drop hot and learn fast. Drop in the zones on the map when you're playing a battle royale where everybody is, and you learn how to shoot people much quicker. And I'm not saying you should shoot anyone. That's terrible. But what I am saying is, I find in my career that I've learned new technologies best when I just like try and start using them on real projects. It's all very well going through a tutorial where you build an album application and sorry, Rob wrote the de facto album application for Zen Framework. So, but it's all very well to try and like look at all the, I'm going to go through these tutorials. And you obviously you need to do that to get some basic understanding. But for me, I learn how to do things by just dropping it into my project and just start trying to figure out how to get it working. And I think personally, I was really reluctant to try these new technologies in anger early on. And I think now I'm, again, probably too far the other way, but I guess that's my job, so it's fine. But I just think that don't be too scared to just start trying new things, new languages, and we'll come to that. In fact, we'll come to it right now, playing other games. So, oh my God, even looking at this makes me... Does anyone know what this is? It's Cuphead, yeah. This is the hardest game, like, single-player game I've ever played. It's a good game, but it's pretty cool. So yeah, playing other games when I'm so angry that I rage quit the game because I can't do anything, going to play something else, and coming back to it always works. And I'm lucky enough in my career, like I totally self-identify as a PHP developer, and I always have, but I've done production work in Python and in JavaScript, both client-side and server-side. So going and looking at other languages, I really feel like it gives you a renewed appreciation for what's good in PHP and what's bad in PHP, both sides. But like when I was working in JavaScript, I'd been using type declarations, PHP 7's type declarations for ages. And I'm like, I can't even say what type this is going to be coming into my method. It really gives you that appreciation of what PHP is good at. As an interesting aside, when I started working on a Node application, we were writing JavaScript code to run on AWS Lambda, right? Kind of serverless. It's all the rage at the moment. So there's a buzzword I can tick off that I've mentioned in my talk. But it was amazing because they were in a room full of JavaScript developers who've been working with Node forever. I was the only person who could really understand how the code should be written because I'd been working with a shared nothing architecture forever in PHP. Like we automatically assume that every request, we can't share things between requests unless we're persisting it in the database and the session or, using cookies. So you're like already in a brilliant place. And I was like, yeah, we can't do that because it's Lambda. And so you can't share things between requests. So the appreciation of what I'd learned working with PHP translated amazingly to working with JavaScript and Lambdas. So, it's all good. As a real other aside, if you are interested in running PHP on Lambda, there's an amazing open source project called Breath that exists now that makes that like super, super easy. And come find me in the pub or hit me up. Like my tweet handle is blatantly on every slide. So hit me up on Twitter if you're interested in that kind of stuff because that's super cool technology and I'm really enjoying. Like PHP is so well suited to being run in this shared nothing serverless environment. It's really good. I do realise I'm keeping you from the pub, by the way. So I might slow down. We're okay. We're doing well. So my next tip is cheat, and there's a number of ways that I think that I cheat when I work these days. Anyone know this game? Counter-Strike, yeah. There's Counter-Strike with a wall hack, so this guy's obviously cheating. The first way that I think that what I've learned this, I learned about empathy, and it's like, oh, he's going to talk about empathy, blah. But honestly, it is like the developer's superpower in my mind. Like, empathy is such a useful tool, and I do not believe anyone who says empathy can't be learned and practiced and improved. Like, being able to understand how someone else is feeling or thinking, right? That's what empathy is amazing for two respects. The first respect is, I already touched upon the fact that many people in this room will be building products as part of a team, and those communications between the team will ultimately decide how quickly and effectively you're developing. And empathy is amazing. Like, oh, you say to your boss, can we rewrite this, or use Rector to port it, I don't know, but can we rewrite this application from Symfony to Laravel, or from Laravel to Slim, or whatever? And your boss like, no, we can't do that. We're not gonna do that. And you're like, oh, he's just not interested in anything new and shiny. But empathy then tells me, oh, maybe he's got a good reason. Maybe we're starting a new project that's using this down the line, or maybe there's financial constraints I don't know about. Somebody's in a meeting disagreeing with you all the time and being generally grumpy. I used to be like, geez, but you don't know what's going on in people's lives. They might have had a terrible night's sleep. They might have had kid problems, or, anything can be going on. And empathy is so important in helping us to be effective as teams. I'm really interested in the dynamics of teams at the moment. So if anyone knows any good resources or books about that kind of stuff, I'd be interested to hear. The other way that empathy is a superpower is, lots of people will be building, most of us will be building tools that ultimately are used by users, and being able to try and consider how our users are feeling or thinking when they're using our UI and our products is also like a superpower. Nobody can log in here because, look, I just realized that on iPad they can't see the login button without scrolling down. These kind of ways of thinking about how people are using our products is amazing. This book has nothing to do with technology. It's a really good book about training empathy and about what it is and how we can improve it. I really, really enjoyed it. This also has nothing to do with empathy, but this is probably my favorite book I've bought in the last 10 years, and so I love to mention this book. If you're making products for users, software as a service or any of that good stuff, this book you should definitely buy. It talks about how you can turn your users into advocates for your product. It's really cleverly written. It has some great examples using like cameras about how your product should be making your user feel empowered. Really, really, really good book. The other thing that I think is like cheating for me is code reviews. I do a ton of open source work. I don't anymore, but I've built a lot of my career based on open source contributions. Did anyone go to PHP UK a couple of years ago when I spoke? Because this is also known as like Marco is watching when I'm doing code reviews. Code reviews are amazing for leveling up your I like free learning is what I call, like particularly open source code reviews, but code reviews, internal code reviews are totally fine as well. Because I've learned so much about PHP development from comments that I've had in code reviews that I didn't even cross my mind, to do it in a different way. It can be difficult. It can be difficult because it's difficult to take criticism of our code because even, all of us take the code we've written as a bit of an extension of ourselves. And when somebody said, you shouldn't have done it that way, you could have done it this way. But if you can detach yourself from the emotion and take on board the criticisms, it's an amazing tool for like improving your developer experience. I'm not saying I've ever done this. I'm totally not saying that. Let me make that clear. But like just making a half-assed job at it and getting someone like with more knowledge to tell you where you went wrong, that's a way you can level up your developer experience too. I'm not advocating that, by the way. So yeah, we're on we're on the final stretch. This isn't a big, long talk. You've already sat through a technical talk. Does anyone know this game? Minecraft, yeah. Like, everyone got it in the room when I first gave this talk, and I didn't realize the name of the game was, like, up in the top corner. I had a blur out. How did everyone... Oh, right, okay, yeah. So, yeah, I've touched on it. I've touched on asking for help. You don't actually need to ask for help. The number of times I've asked for help and never actually needed to ask for help is amazing, because the process, it's a really interesting phenomenon, but the process of putting something into your own brain so that you can explain it to another person, like, makes you think about the problem in a weird, different way. Like, you can tell, like, this is not professional psychology. Like, I don't know what the words are or anything, but all I know is the number of times I've typed questions to ask into Slack and then thought, oh, shit, that's the answer, and deleted the question because I've figured it out in the process of phrasing it into a question is amazing. And that's what this rubber duck, they call it rubber ducking, right? Where you try and explain the problem to an inanimate object, and it forces you to rephrase it in your mind. Trust me, like, that sounds like complete and utter nonsense, but honestly, it just works for me every day. I constantly deleting questions I was going to ask because I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I know what I've done wrong here. That's a really, really nice tip. So I could, like, go on for another 15 minutes and keep you from the pub. Would you like me to do that? Do it? Oh, okay. So then, tip... No, it's fine. So, like, I love to, like, pretend I'm one of these TED Talks where I can finish with something pithy and I got nothing. So we'll just try, like, let's say, like, be nice, make friends, and have fun. That's good enough for me. Thank you very much.